Hello, fabulous humans. I'm Susan from the Atheopagan media team, and today I want to talk to you about coming out as Atheopagan and what that's been like for me, and hopefully give some advice that's maybe helpful for other people in that process. Since my life is going to be obviously very different from everybody else's, I want to give you a little context for where I live and who it is that I'm coming out to, so that you can kind of gauge whether or not my experience is going to be helpful for you at all. I grew up in rural Ohio in what I would say is pretty safely a red area politically. It's the kind of place where there's a different Christian church on every corner, and everybody thought that we were really representative of all the different options in that space. My family, though, raised me without religion. I wasn't talked about. I didn't know the difference between a Republican and a Democrat until I was in high school, and I was just kind of left to make my own conclusions. And I would say that my family is kind of more on the blue end of the political spectrum. Growing up from there, I went to college and, of course, surrounded myself with people who share pretty well what turned out to be my Atheopagan values. And I now live in a suburb of a major metropolitan area in Ohio, so the gamut of available perspectives has widened somewhat from my youth, but there are still, conservative and liberal varieties of folks throughout our suburbs on either side of that, so both politically and religiously. So I have also connected with a bunch of folks at a UU congregation, so I've chosen people to align pretty well with my values, if not my religious beliefs. My husband's family is Catholic, and some of our connections through his family and others are also Baptist. So we have some conservative Christian values, some atheist values, some broad set of different political and religious views to deal with here. So that's what I'm starting with. And really the decision to come out as Atheopagan started when I started doing videos here on the YouTube channel, because my face is going to be on the internet. It's going to be kind of easy for everybody to find that, so I may as well maybe not broach the topic, but not skirt around it as much when it is brought up. And I guess my viewpoint on that too is partly as a mom, I want to make sure that I'm creating the safe space for whether or not my child decides to, be Atheopagan or something else. I obviously hope that she will at least share the values, if not the interest in Atheopaganism itself. I want to create that safe space, and I want to set an example for what a world looks like in which it's okay for us to exist this way. Recently, we took the step of filling out a school form that asked what holidays we celebrate, and we put down solstices and equinoxes. And for me, that was a brave step, because I think that the school situation is the one that is least in my control, and so that's the one that I'm most interested to see how that plays out, and the one that I'm willing to go down guns a-blazing in if I have to. But for my personal life and with our personal relationships, there's really two spheres of people. There's your friends and chosen family, and then there's birth family and married family, where you have a little bit less control than with your friends. With friends, I have found that to be the easiest one to deal with, because this is all by choice, this is all voluntary, and if they're not willing to accept me for who I am wholesale, then I don't have time for that. And I am personally willing to cut ties if I need to. I haven't really had to do that because, as I mentioned before, I have surrounded myself with chosen people who share my values. And while some people are not really, into the whole Atheopagan thing, because they've got their own thing going and it's satisfying for them and it's just not something that they are interested in, although some people have been interested in maybe joining, they don't have any stake in what brings me fulfillment and meaning in my life. And so that's great. And we get on with our lives. What has been the middle ground of maybe less physically frightening and causing worry than the school issue and how the broader community may react and how it may affect my daughter is the non-chosen family, because you have to interact with those people in many cases, and especially with my husband's family, who is, yet a step removed from being under my control of that relationship. It's been something that we talked about, my husband and I, and two, that has been slow and strategic and uneven between different relationships. So for some folks, we just don't ever talk about it. It doesn't come up, and I'm not invested enough in the relationship to bring that up as a topic. It's not important enough to me to pull people aside and say, hey, I want you to know this. It doesn't impact the level of interaction that we have on a regular basis. So I'm just going to leave it there. For other people, it has been a really nice conversation where they're curious and want to know more, or they're not really curious, but they're willing to sit there and listen to me when the person next to them is curious and learn more about it. But having folks who are more on the religious side and folks who are coming from the atheist side, I have a couple of different perspectives on how that has gone, which has been interesting. And in some ways, the folks who are more traditionally religious have in some ways been more accepting of atheopaganism than the folks who are coming from straight up capital A atheism. And I think the reason is that the atheists have this seed of cynicism baked in to their worldview. And whether that comes from a pushback on traditional religions and not wanting to be associated with that in any way, or if it comes from some insecurities from some other place about being thought silly or stupid or weird, I have yet to determine. But some folks who have, I worried the most about judging me because, oh, you don't believe in God, oh, you're going to go to hell, and I'm getting all this vitriol, have been the most accepting and the most understanding of why, as an atheist even, I would want to approach a practice of, I'll call it a spiritual practice for lack of a better term at the moment. But that has been an interesting revelation. Now, obviously, I've been very fortunate in the types of people that are around me that they are open-minded enough to have that viewpoint, and I escaped some of that vitriol. And there are some people who I'm just not going to approach this topic with because I think that it might still happen. But I'm fortunate enough that those are the people who I don't necessarily have to deal with directly in our relationships most of the time. So that has been interesting. And I want to talk a little bit more about the cynicism part from the atheism side, because I think that has been surprisingly, for me at least, the harder thing to deal with, because some of those relationships are some of the ones closest to me, And where for most of my life, the bond that we had was formed around this shared worldview, obviously. And since my worldview is not my cosmology hasn't changed, but my approach to my life is different enough now that I don't feel challenged by it. I don't feel that our relationships are challenged by it. But some of the people on the other side feel challenged by it. And that's an important distinction that I want to help everybody learn to make within yourself when you're dealing with this, which is, do I find this to be a challenge to a relationship? Do I think that my new worldview means that I cannot engage with this person anymore on the level that we used to? Is their behavior a barrier to us having a relationship based on my new worldview? And that's a question you're going to have to ask yourself on a, relationship to relationship basis. Or is it really coming externally from their side of the relationship? Are they the ones who are feeling threatened or challenged, or that the relationship can't continue this way? And it may end up that you have to have a conversation with them about it. If you do identify it on your side as, you know what, I really don't think that this person's no longer a healthy person for me to be around, and then take steps. What do you do then? How do you change the relationship? If they are a friend, that's something maybe a little easier to deal with than if they're a very close family member that, like I said, you don't have as much control over how that relationship plays out. But if it's on their end, there's some things that I think people worry about just saying frankly. And it's often hard for people to be blunt about things. I'm a very blunt and upfront person and an open book. So for me, it's not a big deal to walk up to somebody who I'm having this problem with and say, here's how I feel. I feel like you're approaching this in this way that makes me feel judged, and I don't like that. I'm not going to change based on your behavior, but it is changing our relationship, and I would like to have the relationship back that we had. If you think that we can't have that because of my new life view, then we need to have a conversation about that. And then you can talk to them about whether, if they're just uncomfortable talking about this topic, you can choose to leave it alone. And just make it really clear that their judgment is not fun for you. I also grew up in a family where teasing and picking and sarcasm is kind of the norm. And often I find that fun, and often I use that myself. But there does become a point where the line shifts to bullying, and sometimes people may need help with knowing where that line is for you. If they're feeling very cynical about your practice and making jokes about it, and they think that they're doing it in a fun way, but you don't feel that way, you need to stand up for yourself and say, no, this is important to me. Somebody with a cynical viewpoint may not see how that is important to you, right? That's kind of the basis of cynicism, is that you're undercutting everything's importance all the time and not finding the meaning in things and beauty in life and the world and these practices. So you need to point that out to them if they're not finding that and they're not seeing that it's there for you and that this is important to you. So that's kind of the experience that I've been having so far. Overall, people, I think, just want to be liked and be liked by you. So if you just make it clear that you still love them and still want to be in relationship with them, and that your values that they have known and trusted in you are still the same, which, I mean, nobody comes into atheopaganism and says, well, I'm going to throw out all my values and adopt these principles. I think that we mostly find atheopaganism because we already have these values and they're just written in a nice list for us to grow into. So people are still going to love you. You just might need to help them find a way to do that in a way that works for both of you. So that's my little experience that I've been having so far, and I hope that wherever you are in your journey, that you're able to do so safely if you want to come out as atheopagan. If you can't, then I wish you lots of love and support from myself and from the rest of the community. Cheers, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.